Hi, Siva here, one of the hosts of the GenAI CIO podcast. Today it's a special episode because we have a guest speaker who's a GenAI practitioner and a CIO and the CIO of a large company. And so I'm happy to have Nate Melby today as our guest speaker. Nate is the Chief Information Officer at Dairyland Cooperative. Dairyland, if you don't know, is one of the largest electricity producing and transmission company based in Wisconsin. They are one of the largest power suppliers in the Midwest in the US, supporting over 700,000 people in the area. And they produce power from many different sources like coal, natural gas, solar, etc. Now, the reason I reached out to Nate was the fact that he was able to launch generative AI products within the company, and again, a company which most of us would see as a traditional player in the industry, coming from a very traditional industry as well. But the fact that Nate was able to kind of push the Gen AI wagon so fast was really impressive. And when I started speaking to Nate, I realized that he is actually an academician by practice. He's been leading. I mean, he's led large information technology roles at companies like Ingersoll Rand, which is another massive manufacturing company here in the US. Now, I also understood during my discussion with Nate that he has been an AI practitioner from mid 2000s, and also is a cybersecurity practitioner as well in the recent few years. So I told him in our during our podcast that the combination of AI and cybersecurity is all you need today in the era of generative AI, with data security, data privacy, data protection kind of being a huge concern for enterprises when they look at adopting generative AI. So this in this podcast, you will actually hear directly from Nate on how he and his team went about adopting generative AI at Dairyland, and probably a lot of ideas that you might get when you think about adopting Gen AI in your company. So sit back and enjoy the next 30 minutes of some super insightful conversation with Nate. Nate, hi. Thanks for joining the Gen AI CIO podcast. So we'll directly get into, I mean, how, I mean, the whole adoption that you've been having or seeing at Dairyland Cooperative. So what is the thing that's about generative AI? Why did you start looking at adopting Gen AI, unlike other technologies where we might have taken more time to adopt? What kind of made you to start looking at Gen AI? If you
Yeah,
can walk us through that, it'd be helpful.
thank you. So first, thank you for having me today. I was really excited to join you. It's an exciting topic. We're seeing a lot of change here in our industry, but also, across technology in general. And I think the thing that was most attractive about generative AI for me, being in the energy utility industry, is it's an opportunity to create efficiency. So through the use of generative AI, we can look at the way that we've done certain things and find process improvements and automations that maybe we couldn't before.
Okay, okay, that's fantastic. But I mean, also the generative AI as a technology is not very deterministic in nature, right? Like, it's not like RPA. You don't get the same responses time and again. So as a large enterprise, I mean, you are a massive organization. How did you, I mean, isn't it risky to adopt Gen AI given the non-deterministic nature of these LLMs?
Yeah. So, I think some of the answer is in how we apply it and how we use it. And so there are things that we can do to hedge our risks. I realize that we are in many ways an early adopter, but we started having conversations about policies and policy updates uh, almost a year ago now. And it was very early on in the process. And so we got our policies in order initially, trying to protect our data and look at it from a data protection and risk management lens. And then from there, it gave us a baseline or backstop so that we could continue forward and try to leverage the technology for the efficiency that we thought it could bring.
Okay. And I also saw in one of your recent LinkedIn posts that there were two exciting launches that you had within Dairyland Cooperative. I'm pretty sure there might be more, but can you walk us through that? What are those launches, and what was the decision that was made? I mean, why did you make the decision to build such apps and launch them? So if you can walk us through the process and the apps, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. So the first one I'll talk about is called VoltWrite, and it's a personal Gen AI assistant for our employees. And we started to experiment with the technology. It was probably August of 2023 timeframe, where we knew that we were an early adopter and we weren't exactly sure how we wanted to leverage it. But we knew that it would make a difference somehow. And what we started to see is that in certain areas where we had creative content, communications, marketing, business functions where we're doing a lot of writing and generating that type of content, that there was an immediate application. And the other thing that we started to see, these timelines they correlate with some of the big waves that hit our industry. When we saw GPT 3.5 and GPT 4.0, when those launches happened, we were seeing kind of sea changes in the ways that you could use the technology. And so as we were building VoltWrite, we started to see that there might be applications that were even broader than our typical, generating writing content kind of applications. And so we reached a critical point where we decided that there was enough demand that we wanted to roll it out more broadly. And for us, that was the time where we actually kind of looked at it and said, we feel comfortable with the technology itself, and we think that there is value. And so we wanted to go get that value, go get the efficiency. And you'd be surprised at some of the feedback that we started to receive. We had people in parts of our business we never thought about, being a use case that came forward and said, "Hey, I've got this great problem I just solved." It's things that just make their life easier on a daily basis. We've called it our augmented worker strategy, where we're looking at generative AI as a way to make our workers as efficient as they can be. And we're using it as an extension of them. So extend their creativity and extend their productivity by giving them a tool that can help them really maximize that efficiency.
Fantastic. And you also launched another product, which is on the retrieval augmented generation powered tool, right? I mean, what was the purpose of that product, and how is that different from VoltWrite?
Yeah. So we've started to experiment with RAG implementations, and the first one that we did was called MaxPower. And as a RAG implementation, it was a way for us to look at a volume of information and try to provide a good way to, drill into that information and look for answers when someone has a question. And so in this case, it was related to our HR and benefits information, where there's a volume of data there. And it caused us to initially get familiar with a RAG implementation and how that works, vector databases and the advantages of that. And it was really exciting because it transitions from the generalist kind of view over into a more specific implementation. And once we did that, we started to see that there were some other very compelling cases for something like that. When I think about that in the energy utilities industry, that's when it starts getting really exciting, because we have some industry-specific use cases that can really make a difference for us.
Yeah, given the amount of data that you collect on a daily basis from all your the customers as well, right? Okay. And this is fantastic. I mean, I've never seen, at least very few CIOs or very few large companies are taking this step, which is to open up technology so fast. And you also mentioned that you're surprised by the amount of usage that you are seeing in these apps. Actually, this is a great, I would say, inspiration for a lot of other enterprise companies, because if you are doing it in spite of serving so many customers, why? Everyone else also should be looking at it. Now, the follow-up question on these two agents, are these for internal use? Have you opened up Gen AI for external customers also to kind of touch and feel? Where are you on that journey?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting conversation because they have been only for internal use. And we've been
Okay.
very careful from a data protection standpoint to keep those boundaries. But when you talk about the type of company we are a cooperative. So we are owned by 24 other utilities that are our member owners. And when they heard about our launch into this advanced technology, they all expressed an interest, and just they're curious about what we're doing and how we're doing it and how it helps. And in the cooperative system, we all work very collaboratively together to solve problems. And so it's generated conversations about, could we do more of this together? Is there a way? So even though it's still internal within our system, it's external in the sense that we are separate businesses that work together and collaborate a lot. And so how do we do that? What does the architecture have to look like? How do we evolve this to that next level? And so that's really exciting. We haven't crossed that threshold yet, but it's certainly something that we're talking about.
Okay. Okay. And I also found another interesting point about your other post that you made around small language models. So, I mean, are you using small language models already? What is your view on SLMs? Uh, are these powering your existing apps?
Yeah. So SLMs have some really cool potential, especially in the industry that we're in. So in the energy utilities, there's always a caution and a care that we provide around critical infrastructure. We want to make sure that we are careful in what we introduce in our operations technology environments. And so we're looking at small language models as having potential for us to support things in those environments because they can be private and they can be for very targeted specific uses. And so we're starting to test and experiment with them. I don't think that we've reached a point where the models have been mature enough for the applications we see, but we're very, very close. And as those models continue to mature, we're going to push those use cases because there's huge efficiency that we could gain. Just as an example, if you think about the solar eclipse that's coming in April, and how we have more renewables than ever on our grid. That will affect solar and how
Yeah.
energy is generated with solar across the grid nationwide. And so utilities nationwide are talking about that problem. And, we have ways that we can manage it today, but it's all what I would consider to be pretty manual ways to manage that. Well, through the use of AI, we might be able to further automate that type of a thing, or even help ourselves respond to the real-time needs of the grid by being able to reference changes in our infrastructure that we can make faster and more efficiently. A lot of people don't think about it this way, but the power grid is the largest and most complex machine that has ever been made by man in history. And so to keep
Wow.
all the pieces moving and all the parts, I mean, it's a massive component that doesn't have a single owner. It's distributed in ownership, but we all affect each other. And so, we're looking at ways that we can try to be a better partner, be more efficient, and collaborate better with our member utilities.
That's fantastic. Okay. I mean, I didn't know that. This is probably the largest one that man has ever built. Okay. That's fantastic. So what are your favorite SLMs then? I mean, if I have to ask, what are the SLMs that you've started working on? If you can give us an idea about where to get started.
Yeah, so right now we're really kind of surveying the field at what's available out there, and it's a limitation of hardware. We've looked at Microsoft and OpenAI. There's a pilot project that they have. That one is one that I think maybe has some potential, but we're not just limited to that. Like I was saying, we're really trying to see where the SLMs are going to step forward. And the thing that's different about SLMs, with LLMs, it takes so much infrastructure to build.
Yeah.
You really kind of have this big heavy compute, this big build out is very costly. Well, with the SLMs, they're tuned to learn differently in specific cases. And so for us to find one that meets our needs, it almost has to be specialty built for our industry or easily adapted. And so the models that they have, they don't adapt yet. It's a matter of tuning to the right data sets and how that would work. So
Yeah.
still waiting for the right unicorn to come.
Yeah. I think Google tried with Gemma 2B, which is and Gemma 7B. Couple of things came out. 7B is still not an SLM technically, but 2B actually is. And we also saw Claude launching theirs. They're yet to launch their smaller model, but I think more companies will probably start coming out as well. Uh,
Yep. Yeah, and we
and
anticipate that. We were watching Gemma very closely because Google has an infrastructure, and I think the data focused approach could support our industry. Just we're not quite there yet in any of the models.
Yeah, yeah. We used to dabble with 5 2.7 that Microsoft launched almost 6 months back. But again, we found that it is good for NLP, but not for reasoning something beyond tasks, actually, tasks beyond NLP processes. Okay,
Yeah,
that's yeah,
it seems like and again, it's a matter of compute and scale, right? The natural language, that stuff takes so much more compute to be efficient. We're seeing things that are good at crunching numbers, math, that type of stuff. But when you start getting into the natural language side, then you need that big infrastructure behind it.
yes, yes. And now this gets us into another segue, which is one of the reasons why companies look at SLMs. You can run them locally. You have all the data contained within your environment. So that leads us into the next question, data privacy. As a CIO, what are kind of the guardrails that you're looking at? What kind of data privacy are you comfortable in this current scenario?
Yeah, so the thing that I would say on that one, I mean that is a very deep topic, and as someone who has a background in cybersecurity before I became a CIO, I'm very concerned about data privacy and data protection for that matter. Many companies have had good intentions when it comes to data protection, but haven't been able to do it very well. And in the type of business that we're in, we have certain types of data classification where some data is very very sensitive, and other data is similar to corporate data that you would have in another environment, and a scale that runs the gamut in between. So I would say that when it comes to our operations level data, I have grave concerns and will be very protective of that. And will, part of the reason we're talking about SLMs and experimenting in that space is because they can be used privately, and they can be basically air gapped from everything else. If it has a value for us, we know that we could manage and protect that. Now, beyond that, it's a question of not crossing the line and making sure that with policy and practice that we're not creating scenarios where our employees will do that. It all starts with your data classification and data protection. And, in our industry, we do that well. I'm not saying every company does, and I'm not saying every industry does, but I think it's an extension of that same model. If you protect your data well to begin with, if your data and the structure of your data is in good shape, then you're ready for that evolution. But if you don't have those policies in place, if you don't know what sensitivity certain kinds of data has within your environment, then you can't evolve to that level because you're just asking for a problem.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that you've been very sensitive about the whole data privacy, and you is that, but in spite of that, you're still taking really fast steps. I mean, you were managed to launch a couple of big apps internally, and that is commendable, actually. Uh, that leads to the next question. From a overall Gen AI cycle, hype cycle standpoint, Gartner famously mentions this hype cycle.
Mhm.
How do you see this whole thing? Are we just getting started, or we are kind of trying to move to the adoption phase? What is your view of the technology moving? Because the updates are crazy. Every single week we have a bunch of updates coming in. I mean, we cannot even comprehend where to start. What is your view of this whole the way the technology is moving forward?
Yeah. So I'm going to preface my answer with the fact that I'm also an academic. So I've done basic research. I was doing basic research using artificial intelligence in 2005. So I've been doing this in this space for some time, and
Nice.
um, for for me and my view, I think that we are only at the beginning because in those days we used to say we can do all these cool things, but it's not practical. And we've now become commercialized enough that it's beginning to be practical. And so I know that there is a huge body of knowledge and a huge body of research behind what we're currently bringing to market today. And and so there's much more that can be done. And when I see the adoption and use cases that are happening almost immediately and the excitement and buzz, I mean, the release of GPT 3.5, the whole world went crazy for a while about it. I mean, it was so exciting. And so I see that this is a drop in the bucket. We have a long way to go with this. And I hope that some of those things we see in the world of research come through and become commercialized, because it'll really create some exciting times for us that are in industry.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about this AI angle. It is a potent combination to have AI plus cybersecurity. That's the right combination to have in this current environment. Fantastic to know that you had that background. Uh, Again, on that point, are you, I mean, what do you kind of support? Closed source LLMs or open source LLMs? And why?
Oh boy, there's yeah, you know your topics. There's some philosophical debate around that these days.
Yes.
I guess I'm gonna say I support open source because it creates visibility. But I think that there is a place for the privacy of closed source to generate innovation. So I believe in the advantages of a free market where we can compete for business advantage, and I think that the closed source models they do help us in that environment. Um, and I think it's the quintessential debate. We had it in operating systems, right? Open source has
Yes.
been able to get to a high state of evolution, and we've got some wonderful open source operating systems. We also, with the closed source, have been able to do some very user experience focused things, and then we've created operating systems that businesses have run on for decades. So I don't think it's a question of which one's bad and which one's good. I think we're going to need both in the future for different things. And I think that the transparency that open source has is a really good way to test these kinds of things with stress tests, especially when it comes to privacy and security.
Okay. Okay. That's a nice view that you have. Uh, and because it's not the popular view in Twitter that we see in Twitter, at least, right? Everyone is gunning for open source models, but you are actually, the answer is, you're right. It's a very practical. If you look at practically, open source is open source eventually, but closed source. We see your Windows laptops, MacBooks. It's all closed source. These are not Linux or Ubuntu, for example, that did not become popular over a period of time. Okay. Uh, Now that leads to the second last question. One is, which is AGI. What is your definition of AGI, and do you think that's going to happen anytime sooner? Like, for example, there is a school of thought that AGI is this sentient AI engine that has the intelligence that no other human has ever had. That is kind of a one-line narration that's going around. Do you think that AGI is even possible in this? Uh, or like Meta's data scientist said, uh, we cannot. It's not like AGI will happen over a day. It is a continuous process. We won't even know that it's an AGI until something happens.
Yeah. So um, here's my thought on it. When
Yeah.
you initially asked me the question, the wheels started turning for me, because I don't know that I've had anybody actually ask me a question about that. So I think the notion of Skynet and the fear that people have, that's a basic human fear, right? And I think it's possible for us to create beautiful machines that can learn quickly, that can create knowledge and make connections that we haven't been able to make as humans. Um, but I also believe that at the end of the day, that the idea of what sentient is, the idea of what humanity is, um, there is an element of feeling, there is an element of creativity, there is a foundation of faith sometimes. I think all of the different shades of what humanity is are very difficult to recreate, even in a very complex machine. That doesn't mean that there isn't, beauty and creativity in what could be created, or effectiveness. But I think, the I think it's very difficult to just say that it would be analogous to a human. I think you can create something, and that something is different and new. And whether it's thinking for itself, or it's interacting with, if we have AI that's interacting with other AI and they're learning from each other. I mean, that's all things that we can create with machines on various levels, right? But I think the beauty that is humanity, I think that's a special and unique thing, and I think everything else is a facsimile of that.
Fantastic. Yeah, but that's soul. We don't know. We haven't cracked the soul part of the human, the humans that we have.
Yeah.
Now, last part, right? I mean, when I saw what you built and launched within Dairy Land Cooperative, I was this question came to my mind. Was it a conscious decision to look at chat bots and drag applications? Because we see sometimes CIOs, large companies start like all the way to the top, at the top. I mean, start taking complex workloads. There is this famous quote by an Amazon executive that 90% of the production workloads on Amazon Bedrock are not in production yet because enterprises start going after very tough problems. So, what is your message to the fellow CIOs who are trying to get on Gen AI? Where should they get started?
Yeah. So my message would be jump in, figure it out. Don't wait. This is a wave. You can surf it. You can take the value. You have to be careful, and you have to learn from others, but don't be afraid. We at Dairyland 5 or 6 years ago started doing some work with machine learning, and it was as early as the technology would have allowed us to try to solve the problem we're solving. Sometimes it's a question of what problem do you want to solve, and is there the technology to do that? That's where we're at with SLMs, right? We know what problems we want to solve. The technology just hasn't come yet, but it's coming. So if you know that, then go get it. When it comes to the generalist usage, what I saw, and I had the support of just a wonderful team that understood the same thing, and actually, frankly, is pushing me because we're going further together. But it takes a team.
Nice.
What we saw was that this was a sea change, and a rising tide raises all ships, but the ships all have to be floating. So you have to get in the water and you have to float.
Fantastic. Yeah, dive in. I mean, there is no other alternate to that. You cannot just wait on the sidelines. No, this has been great, Nate, because to really hear from a practitioner, that too from a very large enterprise, this is what we all need in this industry now, because a lot of us are waiting on the sidelines, trying to figure out whether should we get started, if yes, how to get started. But to have a Gen AI champ like you tell us how to get started. This is exactly why I wanted to speak to you. And thanks for accepting my invite as well and my ask. It was wonderful speaking to you. And we would actually want to know more in a few months' time when you have probably cracked a lot more on the Gen AI side. We would definitely come back and want to hear more from you. It was fantastic speaking to you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me today. When you reached out to me, I was excited because it's a fun conversation. But I appreciate your perspective on this topic, and I know it's changing by the day and hour every day. So it's a fun time to be involved in this space. But I just want to thank you for your time and for hearing our story.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks a lot.